this time, ladies and gentlemen, let me turn it over to our host with the most, Mr. Sahni.
Welcome back. So we had the final press conference yesterday for Joseph Parker and Fabio Wardley before their fight on Saturday. Now, I hosted the press conference, so obviously what you're going to hear for the next 10 minutes or so is me recalling how wonderful it was, how handsome the host looked, how eloquent he was, how well he put together his words, the poise of the questions, the delivery, the way he... Yeah, look, I'll be honest, it went better than I thought it would. It was better than I thought it would. Because you've got these two super nice guys, which everyone keeps pointing out, they are essentially, when it comes to press conferences, they're counterpunchers, right? So if Fabio Wardley has someone like David Adelaide, and David Adelaide is saying this and that, like they did in the build-up, they had real genuine beef. They had a shove at the red carpet. They had all sorts of stuff going on, right? So if Fabio Wardley is someone like that towards him, he's going to be reacting with wit and using that kind of... He's very quick on his feet in terms of thinking and coming with comebacks and good stuff to say. Joe Parker's kind of... I don't know, because he will say things with menace, but you're kind of thinking at the same time, we know how lovely you are. We have watched you literally in music videos saying, like, I want you back for good. We've seen you doing Shania Twain, Anchorman, all of this stuff. So it's tough because he does say stuff and he does look like he means it. But you, in the back of your mind, you're like, but he's really, really nice. Does he really mean it? But he does. He does mean it. And I actually think that it was better than expected because of that, because of Joe Parker, because he was saying things like, I'm going to smash him. And actually at the launch press conference, he's been quite tense. So one of the things I want to do when I'm hosting these is it can be easy with two nice guys for it to just kind of descend into like having a bit of a laugh, having a bit of a joke up there. He's a top fella, I'm a top fella, we don't need to sell this fight. And I didn't really want that. And, we've seen it with we've had great fights with Parker and Zhilei Zhang and Fabio and Zhilei Zhang and Joyce Zhang fights really. And they can turn into, I'm going to bang you. And that's great. They're great clips and they go around, they do the rounds. But these are very, very serious fights. And I think for this one on Saturday, what with it being everything on the line, what with it being called all or nothing, it needs that serious tone. And I think we've got that. I think there is a serious tone around this fight because I've said this before, but for Joseph Parker, and he knows it, if he falls off the ladder at this point, has he actually got it in him to get back on the ladder? He's not going to think about losing, but it would be a big fall for him because he hasn't been a world champion since 2018. So for the last 7 years, he has been climbing, falling every now and again, but climbing and climbing to get back to this position where he can become a two-time world heavyweight champion. He was, 24 hours away from his shot very recently against Daniel Dubois, 48 hours, and Daniel Dubois pulled out. So it just gets taken from him. And it feels like this is another one of those moments where he's front of the queue for Alexander Usyk, but it could just get taken from him because the crazy guy that he is, he's accepted a fight with one of the, if not the biggest punchers in the heavyweight division. It sounds like a senseless thing to do. So yeah, there is a serious tone to it. In terms of the press conference, bringing it back to that, Parker was pretty serious. And Fabio made it very clear at the end, Wardley win, Wardley knockout. There are a few talking points in there. One of the key ones here is this concept that I actually think Fabio has presented in the build-up to this fight. The idea of miles on the clock. Fabio is pretty much brand new. He's had 20 fights as a professional boxer. He's had 4 white collar fights. This is fight number 25. Ever where you can get your hand raised at the end. And I'm excluding any potential street fights. But yeah, this is which I know that there have been, because I remember his interview with IFL when it was like the intro to every IFL interview for about a year. and he just said, I've gone back to the dad, punched him a few more times, and it was great. But yeah, I haven't seen that fight, so I don't know how many miles on the clock that put. But Fabio Wardley is a man who doesn't have that many miles on the clock. Joseph Parker has had over 100 fights, amateur and pro. And the point I raised yesterday at the press conference is that Joseph Parker boxed Fraser Clark back in 2010 in the amateurs, right? And it was like 14 years later, Fabio Wardley's fighting him in the pros. That tells you how long Joe Parker has been around. So it's a point that Fabio has presented that Joe Parker may have miles on the clock. This is fight number 40. There's been some hard fights in there. Joe Joyce was a hard fight. The Derek Chisora fights, the first one in particular, was a pretty hard fight. The Zhang fight recently was a hard fight. He was over a couple of times in that fight. And there would have been other ones in his career. You know, the Dillian White fight, that wasn't great either. That all of these fights do add up at some point. I don't know if that some point is now, though. He is only 33 in age, and 40 fights, I don't know, there's a lot of fighters out there with more than that. So I'm not sure, but I like that Fabio has presented that idea, and it kind of flips the whole notion of experience, because everyone's looking at Joe Parker's experience as one of his big keys to win here, because he's just been doing it longer. And Fabio's got a counterpoint to that, which I found very interesting. Another point raised by Fabio Wardley was that he picked this fight. He said it at the workout. He said, people are forgetting, by the way, I picked this fight. I picked Joseph Parker. And Parker quite rightly said yesterday, okay, well, you pick me. I'll say yes to every fight. So really, we've both said yes to this fight. And that is a good point. Whilst Fabio Wardley, let's talk about Fabio Wardley just picking Joe Parker, by the way. I think it's fantastic, because it's the hardest, highest kind of fight that he could possibly pick. He can't fight Usyk right now. Usyk's not fighting right now at this moment. That's why Parker's having to have a fight. We're not sure what's happening with Tyson Fury, so let me go and get Joe Parker. I love that. I love that he's saying, let me go after the Ring Magazine #2. So fantastic stuff there. But Joe Parker is right. He says yes to every fight. He's the most positive version of a yes man that you can see in boxing. I hear a lot of stuff about yes men in boxing. I've been called a yes man in boxing. Joe Parker's the ultimate yes man in boxing, because he just says yes. Would you like to fight Deontay Wilder? Yes, please. Would you like to fight Jinei Zhang? Yeah, I'll have a bit of Zhang. Would you like to fight Martin Bakole instead of Daniel Dubois? Yes. Yes, yes, yes. That's all Joe Parker does. So, yeah, it was a fair point, I think, from Joe Parker to say, yeah, okay, you're saying you picked me, but I'll just say yes to everyone anyway. I was quite happy with my question at the end to Joe Parker, where I said to him, Fabio has learnt something in every fight. You know, he's got better and he's learned something every time. What do you think he'll learn on Saturday? And Joe Parker, I think it was the perfect answer, the perfect thing for him to say, which was he's going to learn that it's okay to take a loss. I thought, that was like a cold kind of response, and Fabio just kind of brushes it off. He says, "Yeah, no, that's just not what's going to happen. Wardley win, Wardley knockout, you know." And he's usually right, Fabio, when he says these things. So yeah, I thought that was a good answer. We've got the weigh-in coming up very, very shortly, so I'm going to head down to the weigh-in. I'll be asking, as far as I'm aware, I'll be asking them questions on the stage, their final kind of word to the fans ahead of Saturday. I do intend to ask Fabio what he thinks he'll learn on Saturday night, and let's see how that compares to what Joseph thinks Fabio will learn. But it's all good, fun stuff. You can probably see I keep looking down. I have actually made a list of things that I was going to talk about. So that's the first time I've done this in one of these videos. Fabio said that every time he steps up, he rises to the challenge, and he's right, isn't he? He's right. Every time he rises to it. There is a draw, though, with Fraser Clark. So that was a challenge that he stepped up to, and it turned out to be the fight of his life at that particular point. That is one where it turned out to be, okay, maybe they were right all along. Maybe Fraser Clark does just know too much. Maybe experience does make a difference. This is an Olympic bronze medalist against a white-collar fighter. And it was a draw. contentious draw. Many had it for Fabio, some had it for Fraser, but there has been adversity. It hasn't all gone exactly to plan every time Fabio stepped up, but he's never lost. And that's one thing he can rely on. And that's something I want to talk about, actually, because amateur or pro, amateur, keep saying amateur, right, white collar or pro, he's never lost. Fabio Wardley has never lost a fight. Joseph Parker has lost as an amateur. He lost a few times as an amateur. He's lost 3 times as a professional. Does it mean anything? Does it mean anything that Fabio Wardley has never had to taste defeat? What does it do for the mentality of a fighter when it's always in the back of your head that I'm just going to win? I'm just going to win. Surely it must be there. It must add something, that kind of ignorance that anything could be happening, but I know I'm going to win. I just know I'm going to win. And he must have had that against Justice Hooney, when Justice Hooney was just, outboxing him for 9 of the transpired 10 rounds, I would say. But Fabio Wardley probably just thought, yeah, I'll get you. I'll get you. Don't worry about that. You ain't going to do this to me here at Ipswich in front of all these people. Don't worry, I'll get you. And I just wonder how much of an advantage that is. But the flip side, again, is Joe Parker's experience in defeat, the lessons from the losses. You learn from your losses. You learn in life from your failures. Every time you fail, you learn from it. You come back. And Fabio Wardley, as a professional fighter, hasn't had that real outright kind of fail yet. There's been the draw, but he hasn't failed. He hasn't had a lesson to learn, really, in a loss. So I don't know. I don't know if that's a factor. One thing I would add on that, sometimes, and see if you could watch some of Joe Parker's interviews and see if you notice it. And it might not mean anything at all. But I've heard Joe Parker say, if I win this fight, then yes, I'm going to go for Usyk. If I win. He hasn't said it too many times, but he said it at least once to me, which means he's probably said it in other interviews here and there. If I win. What does that mean? I think I actually, in the interview I did with him beforehand, a few months ago, when the fight was first announced, he said something like, Fabio's gone for every test so far. Is it going to be enough to beat me? We'll have to see. And I pulled in on that quite quickly and said, we'll have to see. Well, surely the answer for you is no. And he said, yeah, of course, the answer for me is no. But I don't know, just that kind of phrasing of if I win and will Fabio have enough? We'll have to see kind of thing. I don't think I hear that from Fabio much. I don't think I've heard him say, if I win. Maybe that's the difference of being an unbeaten fighter. Maybe Parker's more realistic. Maybe Fabio's more ignorant. I don't know. But I've titled this video anyway as Joseph Parker said to me before the press conference, and it's just clickbait. I mean, what he said to me before the press conference was, don't ask me too many questions. That's all. Okay, I'm off to the weigh-in. See you soon.